Okay, let me share this. Can you guys see my slides?
Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, feel free to jump in anytime as I'm going through this. Just want to explain a little bit where we are with Crane in general. So first, let's start with maybe where we are with Crane 1.0, right? Like so, Crane 1.0 have been around for a fair amount of time now. We have a good list of customers that have been using the tool. So we feel that this tool is getting fairly solid. There's still a few improvements to come, but we're probably in the final versions of the 1.0 releases with 1.5 scheduled for June and 1.6 scheduled for September. That should be after that, like in pretty good shape to achieve what was the goal of actually this project, which was to help our customers migrate from OpenShift 3 to OpenShift 4. But at the same time, we learned a lot from this project, and now we have kind of, starting from a brand new thinking of how we could actually move forward with the Crane 2.0 solution, and from all the lessons learned from the 1.0 release. And this is mostly what I'm going to go over here in the next couple of slides. I'll focus more on what we're taking right now for Crane 2.0. At the same time, this is like, as much as Crane 1.0 is getting pretty mature, Crane 2.0 is very early thinking. So right now, John and team have been doing a proof of concept, but it's still like evolving on, how this. So everything in those slides will be more like what our current thinking of what this could look like, but at the same time, keep in mind that things might change as we're just very early on the Crane 2.0 brainstorming. So let's start with what we learned from 1.0. So one of the most requested feature was the or maybe I should start with one of the main limitation of Crane 1.0 is the fact that you need cluster admin privileges to migrate applications. So for some customers, this is not a problem, as they were expecting the cluster admin to do those migrations. But for some other customers, this is not acceptable, as they would have liked to delegate those migrations to their developers. So in the future, we would like this tool to be able to allow the developer to migrate, or the app owner to migrate their applications themselves without the need to involve the cluster admin, or at least not to have a way to migrate their apps. Even if they need some cluster admin stuff to be done, it could be done like in parallel with the developers, but developers should be able to migrate their own application. I would like to provision my application from pipeline, but migrate my state. So this is another, and this is something actually that we are slowly adding even in Crane 1.0. But this is also a command request. Some customers can reprovision their application from pipeline, but the problem they have is the application state, or the PVs, that needs to move from the current version to the next version, to the next cluster. I would like this to use this migration opportunity to improve my current situation. So this is also a command request. I'll go deeper. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. This is mostly what I'm going to go about in the next couple of slides. And Crane 1.0 was very easy to use, but can be difficult to troubleshoot, right? I think we spent a lot of time trying to make this tool as easy as possible to use. But one thing we learned is when you build a UI and you make this like super user-friendly from a UI point of view, then sometimes it can be difficult to actually see what's happening behind, like pushing that button and troubleshooting, which I think has been improved significantly in the last couple of releases, and what's also coming in on the roadmap for Crane 1.0. It's already much better than what it used to be, but now thinking of a brand new design is how can we actually, like, on top of just thinking of user uh, keeping this easy to use, but at the same time more like how can we improve, how can this be more easily troubleshoot when customers are migrating applications. Anything else you guys would like to add, like lesson learns? John, Eric, like that makes sense?
Can't think of anything.
Yeah, that's a good list.
Okay, so I wanted to start with like why do we need a migration tool in the first place, right? Like could we just reprovision our application from pipeline. So, and we see all kind of maturity level with customers. So as an example, if today you're a customer that can reprovision your application from pipeline and don't have state, they actually don't need any migration tool at all. Like I met some customers that just like I presented NTC to them or Crane, and the feedback was, yeah, the tool's interesting, but we actually don't need it because we can reprovision all our applications from pipeline, and we don't have any state yet. That said, there's a bunch of customers that don't fit in that bucket. So, and they would be, but there can have all kinds of different situations. So the first situation is I can reprovision from pipeline my application, but I need to migrate my application state. So this, I say, would be the more mature customers from an automation point of view. They might have everything from a CI/CD pipeline point of view in place. That all said, like once this app is running on a cluster and this cluster has state, even if I can reprovision it, I need to migrate that state to that additional cluster. So this is the first use case. The second use case is I cannot reprovision my application from pipeline, but I'd like to take this migration opportunity to adopt those new best practices. So this is also something we found over time is, and I've heard from a couple of customers, is the problem is at the end of the day, like the objective is not that much to migrate applications from one cluster to another, because if I just migrate my apps without improving my situation, I'm gonna get into the same problem. And customers see this as a problem, right? Like the fact that I have thousands of applications, like we've done, like I've done a first session with the services team yesterday with the large customers that had thousands of apps, and at the end of the day, like right now they're not thinking about improving their automation. They just want to migrate the apps. But the problem that actually surfaced very quickly is like a couple of years from now, when let's say OpenShift, the next release of Kubernetes of OpenShift comes out, like they'll have the exact same situation again. So ideally, we want to actually use this opportunity to actually improve not only migrate the apps, but also, if possible, improve how they are actually using automation and get them on the right path, so that in the future, they actually need less of a migration tool, maybe outside of just the state piece, but they could reprovision from pipeline from one cluster to another instead of having to migrate everything at scale in a short amount of time. The third one is I don't have CI/CD automations for all my apps. Some apps have been provisioned, like, so this is a common thing, right? Like, so some customers will have CI/CD for some apps, but usually the most important apps they have, but they also have tons of other applications that have never been automated. They're just manual things that have been provisioned and don't really care about those apps. So they just need to migrate them as is. So if you think about this, like, so that comes up with different kinds of migration scenarios. So the first one is what we do today, which is I have Kubernetes objects, PVs, and images that I just need to move from cluster A to cluster B. So this is, what actually Crane 1.0 does. The downside of this approach is that, like, when I have to migrate again, I haven't improved my situation at all. I just move all my stuff. It works for now. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of pain to do that. Some customers have even requirements of having to migrate or doing this a lot of times, thousands of times in a very short time frame for all kinds of reasons. So this brings up a lot of challenges in executing that at scale. But it can be done, and we still want to do it in the next release, because there's still some apps that I might not care about improving, that I just need to move it so that I can move forward with whatever situation I'm in. That all said, now we want to just open the door to other scenarios. And the first one is, I'm a customer, I can reprovision from pipeline, but I need to migrate my state. That could be one thing. I think this is the most simplistic one. But the other one is, I have an unknown deployment model, like maybe things have been built manually right now on my current cluster. But in the future, I want to use this opportunity to actually leverage automation and CI/CD and GitOps philosophy so that I can actually improve my situation in the future. So the way we're thinking about this right now is, okay, could we, instead of just exporting and re-importing the Kubernetes objects on the destination, we should actually reconstruct those manifests and push them to Git, so that the new solution that the customers would have for CI/CD could actually leverage that. So their CD solution could actually pick this up from Git and reprovision the app. So this way, at least at the end, I'm in a state where I have automation to actually provision that app. So if I would have to provision that to another cluster in the future, I would not have to reconstruct those manifests anymore. I could start leveraging this automation. And same thing for the source code. Obviously, we cannot actually capture the source code from your images. So if you have a way to push that to Git and reprovision it, you could. But if you can, then at least we can move this image in a way that could be reprovisioned from your CI/CD pipeline. And as well as, obviously, you need, if you have PVs, you will have to migrate state. So those are all different steps that could be attached together to actually at least get a customer closer to some kind of automation model when they are provisioning on their destination cluster. Does that make sense? Anybody has any questions? So, and John, feel free to jump in anytime, but like I think based on the philosophy that we want to actually keep this easier to troubleshoot and more like following the Unix philosophy of having separate tools doing separate things and easier to troubleshoot them, then right now, like this has been built more like on a, at least for the proof of concept, in some kind of command line approach, where you have some kind of a tool that does like crane export, crane transform, and then you can push to Git. And then if you would mirror the PVs, it would be like a similar type of command. And
hey, Marco, if you can just go back.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a little bit of stuff to add on here. So some of the things that came into our mind when we were proposing this is that we did stuff with Crane that we solved a lot of problems, but we did it in a way where it's almost like we locked that stuff into a solution. And if you wanted a piece of it, you wanted to reuse that piece somewhere, we made it really hard for you to be able to reuse it. The other thing is we didn't do a good job in visibility. So we would do stuff where we would export all the resources from a cluster, we'd store them in S3, but we never showed a customer how to actually find where those resources are, how to tweak them, how to do anything with them. So we had this, basically this pattern that we solved the problems, but we hit them almost with an easy button. And what Marco is talking about right now is we're trying to go back and break the different solutions together and do it in a way where folks can take whatever they want in and then be able to just use that if they want to, put something else in. The big one of what's being shown right now is we're trying to do all this workflow just from a shared file system, just to make it very simple, just like a normal Unix tool. So you can do the export, get anything you want to. You can run a series of transforms that essentially will make those things we exported cleaned up so they're repeatable. And then you can reuse that on other clusters. And as we're doing that, we want to embrace this way where if somebody needs to customize something we haven't thought about, it's very easy to do that. And that's inherently really the big thing we're trying to go after with Crane 2.0. We're trying to make it with these small tools so you can kind of tweak what you need to. You have visibility to see what's happening. And then over all of this, there will still be that easy experience where we'll probably leverage something like a Tecton pipeline, Argo CD, do something very opinionated that sets somebody up for a GitOps workflow. But under the covers, it would be made up of these tools. So somebody can go through and tweak the pipeline and do any changes that they need to.
Marco and John, one question: do you see any kind of synergy here with what Move to Cube has in terms of transforming some of these source artifacts and generating some of the pipeline artifacts? I'm just wondering if there's some synergy here.
I think there's some synergy for the transform piece. What I see with the transforms is that we're embracing this in a way of thinking that we will not know what needs to be transformed. So we want this to be a case that there can be a shared repo, that folks can understand different things that I kind of learned. We have a concept like this right now with our Bolero plugins of about 20 edge cases that we've learned in OpenShift that are needed when we migrate between things. We want to get something where we have a community that can contribute to those transforms and then have something like that that can be leveraged. When we look at the transforms, there's probably different kinds of transforms. There's probably going to be some that are more involved. That might be some that you have in Move to Cube, maybe stuff based in Starlark, where you're going from like PCF to something else. Then we also want to have a concept of transforms that's very lightweight, something that perhaps is like a JSON patch that is just more for a small tweak. We're still kind of going through to figure out what the transform piece will look like, but Sean's been working with Ashok on some of this too, kind of talking through and figuring out what the approach would be.
And
Got it.
and I would add to that, like we did this. You guys did a great session, right? Presenting like how you got to the solution you got into, presenting like how you look at Starlight and JSON patch and customize, right? And that was very interesting. But I think my perception after this session was that like you guys, because you're moving from anything to Kubernetes, you need a lot of power because the amount of transform you're doing can be very complex. So you need a lot of flexibility and power because it can be anything. My concern, I think, from a Crane point of view, because it's just Kubernetes, we need to also make sure that we are adopting whatever is in general like the market it will be using to solve that problem from a Kubernetes point of view. So just want to make sure that we're not picking necessarily just the best technology, but the one that has the most traction, because that will be important to actually for this to get picked up by customers and have some community to back it up behind it. That's I don't know if that's a real concern or not yet. Like I'm trying to actually make my opinion on that still, but that's my only concern here is I want to make sure because I think this Kubernetes to Kubernetes transform thing, it's not only for us, like there's probably a lot of people are trying to solve this problem. So I'm curious to know if you guys have a perception of what is currently more used by the market versus just what is the best technical solution.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with you, Marco, and the way I am hoping we figure this out is that it's not a one-way thing that, okay, Move to Kube's got something and Crane's got to use that. I'm just saying that, okay, you guys are looking at this from a different angle, and you're identifying requirements that perhaps Move to Kube might not have looked at, like the one you said. And it'd be great if there was some kind of common transformation capability that could be used in both workflows, right? Just because that would just create a lot of reuse and enable everything, right?
When it's the same use case, totally, right? But sometimes they're not the same use case, I think, because when you're migrating something from not Kubernetes to Kubernetes, the level of complexity is much higher. I feel, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know from a technical point of view what you guys think, but like my perception is that you need a lot. That's why actually Starlight was a great solution for you, because it's all Python based and you can code around it. But I'm just wondering, is that too much for somebody that just want to do simplistic changes to a Kubernetes definition? Is like providing them that super powerful Python based tool, is that increasing the complexity from a customer point of view to actually reduce the complexity on our side to have one solution? That's all what I'm questioning, if that makes sense. And I don't know the answer to it. I'm just sharing my perception.
Yeah, and maybe we have both options. The way I'm thinking of it is, let's say we work a lot with GBS, for instance, right, in IBM, and GBS could be viewed as a potential large consumer of our conveyor tools as a services organization. And so if they are, let's say, using Move to Kube in some context with a client doing large scale migration to cloud, having that ability of maybe with JSON patches as the way to configure these transformations could be useful there, right? So I'm just saying that whatever we do as a joint team, maybe support different options. If we can have something that's reused in both places, right, then we increase the chances of adoption on all fronts.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, definitely. John, anything you want to add to this based on what you found so far?
I think it makes sense. The thing that we're looking for is, like when you see here Crane CLI tool, the thought is this is a lightweight tool that's going to use a series of shared Golang packages. So as far as the transforms will probably end up being their own library, and that could be a common spot that we can work towards. Right now, I see 3 different potentials that come into transforms. There's one where it could be something of maybe it's the re-platform case, and perhaps that's one where it needs to be very powerful. There's one of this exact piece that's shown on the slide right now is a smaller kind of tweak where we're taking a export from Kubernetes that could be a little bit dirty in a sense, cleaning it up, tweaking it so it's repeatable. And that could also come into some small differences of it's maybe going from EKS to ROSA, some other kind of knowledge that gets built up. Then the third one would probably come down, which I'm assuming would be customized, is when something's actually going to be applied to a particular target, almost like a templating to kind of change some of it. So rough thing right now for transforms, I think we're seeing 3, I guess we can call them use cases that are kind of coming up, but still kind of really exploring this space.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. I think my ask would be just kind of the teams to stay engaged so that we just are aware.
Oh, for sure.
I think
Yeah, let's keep the communication open between us, definitely. That makes sense. So we are aligning, and let's keep sharing on what we'll keep sharing with you on what we're thinking and why we're making decisions as we are progressing on our thinking. And you can also provide feedback back to us if you think you were wrong. Like, feel free to say it. Like, no worries. That's good. It's good to have an open conversation on that.
No, I appreciate that. Thanks, Marco.
Marco,
yeah.
So sorry, just to add to that, those comments, right? Like, yes, absolutely, it would be good. It is very good to be on sync. And just one other point I would like to mention is, I think both the use cases are trying to solve the same thing in some sense, right? In the sense that even in re-platform, the transforms that we are looking at is more about Kubernetes to Kubernetes. So that is why when we worked on the transforms, it was a very good synergy, and we could reuse the capabilities across both the solutions. That's on one front. And the second thing, John, I would like to understand is this a transform capability that we are thinking of that creates a GitOps like Argo CD or something, or is it that will be a different one?
Yeah, no, not for that one. What this really is, this is what we've been doing for the past 2 years of migrating things between OpenShift clusters. There are some cases that we do this, we need to drop out the status field, or there's a case we have to drop out a different field, or it's in the spec, make a slight tweak to it. So this is essentially trying to codify the knowledge of edge cases of things that we've learned, where we take out whatever our resource or representation is, what do we have to do to make it reusable? In theory, you shouldn't really need these, but as we've been seeing, we do need these. So this would be the first thing would be to replace all of the OpenShift Valero plugins we have with the capability they provide, but do it through a way that it's something of a simple kind of JSON format transform, something that you can look at that's 5-6 lines, you can see what it's doing, you can tweak it if you want to, put it in. So this really is about trying to get the export so it's reusable. And then later, as far as putting this to a GitOps pipeline, that would not be handled through the transforms. But there would be a concept of something like this with customized just based on normal kind of workflow of Argo CD.
Sure. And the other additional point I was just wondering is this looking at that version conversions too?
Mm-hmm. Yep, there would be some pieces in that as well.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
So the next one is a similar thing, right? So that would be similar concept, right? You have this tool that would also take care of the move. So I think this is.
And Mark, we just pause 1 second just to call out, because I know John's on the call too. This is where we're thinking under the covers. Our plans to go forwards to leverage Scribe for basically what's going to happen for moving the PV data or copying it, things like that.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. So I know John's in there, and I think a few other folks from his team might be too. So. We haven't done the work yet, of course, to actually integrate Scribe into this, but that is in our future.
Great, thanks.
So at the end, like, and this is a slide I created this morning, John, so if that doesn't make sense, let me know, but I kept it very simplistic. But our thinking right now is that what actually Crane would do later on is actually create all those steps in some kind of Tecton pipeline that could then be customized by the customers, right? We need a way that, like, actually right now, like it's like a state machine, right? It's a bunch of steps that needs to be executed one after the other. So, and outside, instead of just reinventing the wheel of how to create our own state machine and actually manage all that ourselves, like, why not leveraging actually a pipeline project like Tecton to actually just do that and to actually get that kickstarted for the customer so that like they could have an out-of-the-box pipeline that they can then execute. But if they need to customize it or change it for their migration, then that pipeline would become available before they click the migrate button to actually fine-tune it or change it or customize it so that they can actually add steps or do other things that we haven't think about in our current flow. Does that make sense? So the whole idea is that to leverage our own dog food kind of thing to actually provide this migration flow or step-by-step thing that needs to happen. So if you look back at like the goals, right, that we're trying to do based on what I just described is, so if going with that approach, then an app owner could migrate their own app, right, which is one of the things we actually wanted to achieve. It will be a bunch of small little reusable parts that actually are put together in a pipeline, but actually they're all breakable into small little chunks of codes that run one after the other that would be easier to troubleshoot when something goes wrong and are reusable. And even the transform piece like should be modular and reusable so that we don't have to actually go deep all the time. Only when you have complex use cases, then customers have the flexibility to add more customize things into it. But for more simplistic use cases, like it should work out of the box, just doing those out of the box piece of code that we can put together in a pipeline. Then as I was saying, it's customizable, so you can extend it or customize it. And it brings the customer closer for those that will want to do that to GitOps onboarding or GitOps philosophy, where we can, instead of just migrating for you, we can push everything to Git, and then it's your brand new Argo CD solution that might provision it to you on your new cluster. Or if you don't want to do that, then in the backend, we might still use those same technology, but that could be transparent for the customer, but we would be able to just migrate from A to B. We don't want to force them to move forward with GitOps as an example, but that should be something we encourage our customers to do so that more customers are moving forward with automation at the end and not just doing provisioning of apps without any way to actually reprovision them or automate like whatever needs to be automated to really have actually a modernized app running on Kubernetes. So if you look at this as well from a persona point of view, right, like we have two kinds of migration, and I don't have all the answers here. I'm just sharing my thoughts on what I've heard from customers. So so the first persona is like this developer or app owner that needs to migrate his own application. So this is still one, and this slide was part of our last planning, is something that hasn't changed. Is some people would like to give the ability to app owners or developers to migrate their own application. So this is more like I have one application that I want to migrate from A to B. But you still have this other persona, which is the cluster admin, that still have to migrate large amount of apps also, and has to do this typically in a short time frame and at scale. So this is more like migration from OpenShift 3 to OpenShift 4, or migration to ROSA or Arrow, like all those are migrating to the cloud, or like there's many occasions where, or refreshing hardware, or there's all kinds of reasons that you might want to evacuate a cluster and reprovision hundreds or thousands of apps from one place to another. So actually, we need to find a way to serve both customers with the same set of tools. So the use cases are a little bit different, but at the same time, they do the same thing. So if you look at the first persona, one thing we just started exploring, and this is really early on, but is actually, could the developer experience be actually inside the OpenShift UI? So from a developer point of view, like they go to the Kubernetes of the OpenShift UI, and then from there they could have, hey, you're brand new here, you don't have any apps, would you like to import applications from another existing OpenShift cluster? And then they could actually search for an app that they have already on another cluster and then import it. And then we would give them the option to either just lift and shift, right? Like what we do today, copy paste the app, reprovision from Git, but just migrate the state, or actually adopt a new GitOps philosophy and maybe migrate to Git so that they are new. And again, like I'm sure there's a lot of things that we need to figure out from a technical point of view if that even makes sense. But that's kind of just a high level thinking of like what this could look like from a user experience point of view right now. And we've done this without any engineering in the room, so that might explain why there's some holes here from a technical point of view. But the idea is like, how can we make it simple for a developer to import an app from another cluster, have some kind of options of how they want to proceed with this migration, for then having some translation or transformation capabilities that could be modular and easy to consume. Then the tool would do the migration. Then if in it that the app owner or the developer could do some testing, and if something goes wrong, could rinse and repeat as many times as he wants until he's happy with the condition of the app on the new cluster, and then do the final migration, something like that. So again, this is just very early thinking of what this could look like. We have a bunch of additional meetings coming to actually go deeper on what this could look like from a technical point of view. But the whole idea is like, and you could think like maybe one day you could have a similar thing as well from migrating from even a move to Kube point of view, migrating from another platform than Kubernetes. Like we could bundle it like directly inside the OpenShift UI. If that, I don't think that's gonna happen tomorrow, but like that's something that to think about as we are building all this. Could we actually open the door to one day have something like that would make it super easy to migrate from any platform to OpenShift? And from a cluster admin point of view, I don't know if you put any thoughts on that, John, yet. Like, I'm still questioning in my head, like, do we actually need a UI like we had in MTC 1.0 to actually help mass migration, or should that just be a bunch of Unix command line or something that pushed this to a pipeline and would be more UI like command line driven, or what's your thinking of how we could potentially do the UX experience from a cluster admin point of view?
I haven't thought about it yet.
Yeah.
I think you bring up a good point. So what we've seen with customers is I've seen people use the UI to kick off and to manage jobs, but use the API to create them. And a lot of people, the API seems like that's going to be very important for this. I don't know if it's worth the UI for the ability just to see what's happening. But it is going to get more complex to debug the things, to be able to tweak some of it. I don't really know right now.
Yeah, and I'm also questioning the value of the UI for this use case. I'm wondering if we should not, and I'm just thinking out loud, if we should not focus more the UI experience more for the developer use case, and bring this more like, make this more like API driven and command line driven for the cluster admin. As like we were talking to a customer not that long ago, and actually the reverse engineer pretty much our solution to do this at scale from a command line point of view, because that was just a better way to do it when you have to migrate hundreds or thousands of applications, right? So, and we didn't have great doc on our API, and so they had to actually look upstream and figure this out. And so this shows like that actually when you do this at scale, and I'm thinking even of other customers, like when you do this at scale, it's actually sometimes much better to actually have full control and full visibility at the command line level of how you would do this. Obviously, some customers would still prefer a UI and easy button, but sometimes it's also set the wrong expectation that this is an easy button thing to migrate 5,000 apps, which is not the case, right? There's a lot of complexity in migrating a large amount of apps in short amount of time. So again, just food for thought, something to think about of where we want to move forward with this in the future. But for now, I'm thinking like this is the thing we need to figure out more from a UI point of view, is how we make this as easy as possible from a developer point of view. And this we need to keep in mind that like you need, as you're doing this at scale, it's more about troubleshooting and flexibility and automation that you need to figure out, I guess, to really do this well at scale. That's it for me. In general, like, does that make any sense? Or I see Ryan Cook, you're on the call. I don't know if you're on mute or something. Like, we had some discussion by email so far. I don't know if you saw the beginning of the presentation when I was talking about pushing to GitHub. So I think you're looking at doing something similar, right? Right now?
Exactly. Yep. The exact, even when you're developer experience, that was something that I've been looking at as well. But I feel like you guys have actually covered it kind of in a little bit more of a mature format than I was looking at. So I had one question. How would for the developer experience, how would the process actually run? Would it be binary based, or would you go like with an operator within the cluster?
Yeah, we've been kind of thinking of a few things. I think well, one thought right now is to start off the development where it's geared of just CLIs that run, and then make that be the experience that we're initially doing. After that, I think it might come in that there could be a controller that's in the cluster, and we can tell roughly what we want, and the controller is going to create the Tecton pipeline that under the covers would execute all those commands that we want. We haven't really fleshed out how that works out, what we want to do. Right now, we deploy a controller that goes through and does the full reconcile of a migration. And what we're seeing with that is it gets very complex, and then it's hard for folks to debug and see what's happening. We were trying to find a pattern where we could make that easier for somebody to see what's happening and then tweak it. So at the moment, if we do have a controller, I think the controller would be lightweight, and the controller may just do something where it actually leverages Tecton to run the full pipeline, and then from that you can tweak whatever you want to. Still something that we haven't put a lot of thought into, really.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. I mean, because it's it's definitely back and forth depending on what the organization really prefers to use, whether they want to just stick with using cluster-based resources or if they like binaries. So yeah, I mean, I think it might be an interesting, because I saw a couple intersection points with kind of the CAM project, with their pipeline and Argo capabilities, as well as some of the stuff that I've been doing with the Primer project. So I don't know if we have that meetup next Monday planned, and I don't know if we take that opportunity to kind of share some notes, and try to see from there what some directions to go and team up.
Yeah, I think that'd be great.
Yeah, that makes sense. We just think that this is like the mic, like, and I got similar feedback from other like OpenShift PMs. Like the migration opportunity is just a good time to actually move customers to GitHub's philosophy, as an example, because it's a disrupting event, right? Like they're building a brand new clusters, they're adopting brand new best practices. So this is why, like, we wanted to do that, and I think you're having a similar thinking. I think more from the same, minus things from the same cluster to the same cluster instead of migrating from a cluster to another. I think in your approach, but the migration of a cluster to another is really a good time to actually kind of push for that. So that would kind of make sense. Let's share a note and figure out how we can actually work on that together.
Agree, because from a developer point of view, and you had the whole developer card set was massive. It's hard to actually remember what all you modified in getting your application to run. And I think I think you guys identified the developer experience as a little tough and really compelling. And so I think that if at the end of the day we can make that easier for people, whether they're developing on Kind and they want to go into OpenShift, or they're developing on whatever and they want to run on OpenShift, I think that's where we're really going to profit.
Yeah, this exact same thing came up during the tackle session as well. So whatever you do, I hope it is pluggable somehow.
Yeah, that's what we need to figure out. Pluggable things and sharing enough so that we're not reinventing the wheel 500 times. So that's always a challenge.
Yeah, definitely.
But we'll get there. Any other questions?
Yeah, hi Marco, it's Gareth here from the EMEA Solutions practice in Red Hat in EMEA. I just wanted to ask your advice about how you differentiate between migrating applications using tools like Crane or MTC versus just using what developers are familiar with, maybe like their CI/CD tools. So a lot of customers I deal with use OpenShift as a PaaS, and they have their CI/CD tools, and they have the capability to build and bake and deploy using things like Jenkins and all the other CI/CD tools like Nexus. Why is that not a suitable strategy for migrating applications compared to MTC? Is it just really something about scale here? Are we talking about scale?
No, it's the fact that they don't have automation. Like the customers that need our tool or sorry, my cat just jumped in my face. The customers that need our tool is the one that don't have automation. They don't have CI/CD pipeline, or they have state. They have PVs and state they need to migrate. I personally think that like the best thing for our tool would be to actually heal itself over time. Like if we can make, I know that sounds terrible from an engineering point of view, I'm sorry, but like ideally we want to get customers to actually bring them closer to automation so that they don't need a migration tool. The problem we have, like what the problem we're solving is those that have thousands of apps and have no idea how to reprovision them because they don't have automation. So, and the better we can, that's why I'd like the tool of the future to actually not just migrate, like the idea of the tool is not to stay in the business of migration, should be to actually move our customers closer to using CI/CD or GitHub's philosophy and to and automation, so that they never have to use the migration tool again. That would be, I think, how we should approach it in general.
Yeah, understood. There's the nirvana state, right? And then there's the reality, and I guess this tool is there to help with the reality at that time, which is they may not have those tools in place. So yeah, I understand the answer. Thank you.
There's always going to be the migration of state that will likely never go away, because like this part is you still need to migrate state if you have PVs. Like even if you have a pipeline, like how do you deal with that application state? That's also a common use case. So those that don't need MTC at all, or those that have automation and don't have state, like typically that meeting for me goes in 5 minutes, and no, I don't need MTC, I don't need it. So very quickly. Then after that, it's those that have pipeline but have state. So then they need a tool to migrate that state, and we're just starting to do that and exploring that. But then you have all those customers. There's a large amount of actually applications out there. I would say there's probably much more applications that don't have CI/CD pipelines and not following best practice than they are that are following those practices. So that's why we're in that business right now. That makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Marco, is there a plan to support any kind of refactoring during a data migration, like for example, moving from say one kind of storage to another that results in some configuration changes for the application?
But if you're talking about storage backend, we do that right now because we're just copying the file system. So for example, right now, many customers change their backend storage as they are migrating, but we're just copying the file system. So there's no other additional logic. If there would be a need for some kind of logic to adopt a new system, then no, we don't have anything like that today.
Yeah, right now the basics are with the storage class, so we'll change a little bit of that. There's some things I'm looking into changing the resource quota and some other things that are associated, but it's not really application specific. It's more Kate resource specific.
Okay, got it.
But again, this could be something to explore in the future, like having a database that might need to run as an operator on the destination side. But I think that should be more probably, again, like if you can push this to Git, and then you can have a pipeline that you can customize to do those steps to actually get you in a better state on the destination side, instead of just baking this inside the logic of the tool itself. To me, that would make more sense.
Sure.
Anything else? That's good. Thanks all. That's all for today.
Cool. Thanks, Marco.
Any closing thoughts, James, on the
No, I think this is where we're supposed to go get a beer. This was 2019. But I'll just, I guess, have another coffee. No, thanks for putting this together. I think it's a good discussion. I kind of, the thing that I liked about today, and I know not everybody stuck around for every section, but it was kind of cool to see the folks from Crane on the tackle section, the folks from Move to Cube on the, you know what I mean? So kind of getting an understanding of where the other tools are, and hopefully that'll lead to more kind of modularity and reproducibility, integration over time. But I don't know if anybody has any other thoughts on, oh, I didn't do a retrospective for day 2, huh? I probably should have sent some sort of Miro board out for that with like put your comments in. But does anybody have any thoughts? What could have been done better?
We need breaks between sessions.
Yeah, I noticed that too. And I had to drop for a Turbonomic demo from 9 to 10 that I organized without realizing that it overlapped with this a couple weeks back. But I thought it went well. I guess my one thing on the forklift stuff, and I mentioned this to Miguel, was that I think I don't think he's on anymore, but I think since we do have more frequent sessions now, like quarterly planning, it's probably best to think like 3 to 6 months and not necessarily talk too much beyond that, because we're going to be meeting. If you talk about something that's 12 months out, you're going to meet to talk about it 3 or 4 times before you get there, right? So, but outside of that, I don't think I really have much any other takeaways on my side. Does anybody else have any something they'd like to see more of or less of? No, it was perfect and it can't be improved, huh? Somehow I doubt it. All right. Well, I'll just look for all your messages on Google Chat with your complaints later then. No, but that's awesome. Cool.
James, I have one question.
Yeah.
We had a time slot for tomorrow for anything parking lot, but as far as I'm aware, there is nothing in the parking lot. So do we want to use that time for anything?
That's a good question. So we just have moved to Cube tomorrow, yeah, from 8 to 9:30.
Yep.
That's a good spot for feedback retrospective.
Oh, Brett, you're really quiet.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Test. Okay. Sorry, I had my mic up. I pulled a John Matthews there. I'm gonna pick on him a little bit, but it may be a good time slot for like a retro/feedback session. It doesn't have to be long, maybe 30 minutes, just to see if we can maybe capture some closing items there. Or maybe it's a review of what we've already captured in Miro.
Yeah, I like that. I'll take the day 1 board and copy it, and then we can just run through that exercise tomorrow.
Okay, I think that sounds good. I will say that it was originally a Polaris session, and that's who the invites were. I tried to forward it to some of the other team members just to make sure that it covered everyone. But if anyone on this call wants to be on there and isn't, just please let me know. I don't think I've got everyone on there. So that's just one little caveat.
Okay, cool. We'll try and spread the word, I guess, on the chat channel too. We could do that as well, right?
And I'll update the agenda.
Yeah, all right. Cool. Thanks, everybody.
Awesome. Thanks all. Have a good day.